Welcome to our second annual Plan Giving Information Program. My name is Deborah Notman. I've been a member of Temple Micah for 27 years, and I currently serve as Micah's the chair of Micah's Development Committee. Our purpose with this evening's program is to provide members of the Temple Micah community with information about planned giving. In contrast to charitable giving you may do in your lifetimes, planned giving refers to how you can include Micah in your estate plans. And as many of you know from mailings you receive from your college or university or perhaps other nonprofits, planned giving is encouraged by many organizations. We hope this informational webinar will bring Micah to the top of your minds for consideration in your own estate planning decisions that will take effect after your death. We thank all of you who have already done so. Your commitment to our community helps us grow, innovate, make lasting social change, and keep Micah vibrant for generations to come. Planned giving also helps you make a larger contribution than a cash gift, which furthers your support for Temple Micah while providing tax and other financial benefits to you. You'll hear this evening from our panelists that there are many ways to create a meaningful and lasting legacy that not only enriches Micah's future, but also reflects Micah's singular place in your life and your families. We are recording this event, and we will be making slides and handouts available to you later. I'd like to begin by briefly introducing our panelists. Noel Salinger has been a member of Temple Micah since 2008. Noel's had a distinguished career as a leader in institutional development, including among other institutions, the American Civil Liberties Union, the University of Chicago, and George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. And before retiring in 2018, Noel spent 7 years as Director of Individual Giving at the Smithsonian Institution. Sid Booth joined Temple Micah several months after attending its first Yom Kippur service, which was held in a Southwest Washington church in September 1963. He has been actively involved in the temple ever since, serving on the board as president in 1970, editor of The Vine, and co-chair of the campaign to build our addition several years ago. Gail Kahn has practiced law since 2001. Gail's law practice, Kahn Law, is focused on wills, estates, and probate. Gail is a member of the Maryland State Bar Association, the Bar Association of Montgomery County, the Olney Chamber of Commerce, and the Montgomery Prince George's County Tax Study Group. While not a member of Temple Micah yet, Gail has graciously agreed to share her expertise with us. And finally, Jim Hamos. Jim and his wife Andrea have been Micah members since 2009. Before attending services, their first involvement with Micah was with a group of people, including Sid Booth, who were contemplating Micah having a more established endowment through planned giving. This has led Jim to serve on the board now in his second term, the Development Committee, the Finance Committee, the Roadmap Core Team, and Sukkot Shalom. So for our format this evening, I will ask each of our panelists to speak consecutively. We will use the chat window in Zoom to gather questions from those of you listening. And Micah's executive director, Rachel Gross, will receive your questions directly and moderate the Q&A session following our panelists' presentations. So we'll begin by turning to Noel, again, a member of Temple Micah's Development Committee. He brings a trove of experience as a former director of individual giving for the Smithsonian. Noel?
Thanks so much, Deborah. Sounds like you were introducing somebody else, but thank you for the generous introduction. As Deborah said, Temple Micah has been an important part of my life for the last dozen years, I guess. I first got involved participating in Merrill Weiner's adult B'nai Torah class. Perhaps there are others on the call who have gone through that process. I was called to the Torah in 2011 on a day that to this day is still one of the most memorable days of my life. I participate in the Saturday morning Torah study group. I've been a regular Saturday Torah service regular for many years, finding many moments of peace in our beautiful sanctuary. And I know we all hope we can get back there very soon. And each summer I participated in our very lovely and quiet lay-led services in a variety of ways. So I'm very grateful to have had these experiences and to be part of the vibrant Micah community. But I'm especially grateful because I know I'm a beneficiary of the financial generosity of many, many members of Temple Micah over decades. Our sacred space, our wise clergy, our inspiring music, the leadership of our staff, our innovative programming, none of it would be possible without the generosity of our members, or without the careful stewardship of our resources by the Temple Micah board. Even during this plague year of pandemic and Zoom, the congregation has been extraordinarily generous, enabling our leaders to create amazing virtual services each Shabbat and the amazing inspirational high holiday services we just experienced. But it wasn't always so. Some of you know far better than I do that in the early years it was often touch and go. It was not a foregone conclusion that Temple Micah would survive, let alone become a leader in American Reform Judaism. The temple was fragile in its first years, but our founding members, our patriarchs and matriarchs, dug deep into their pockets, and the staff and clergy watched the pennies carefully until they turned into dollars. Those of you who are with us this evening, I'm going to guess it's because none of us wants to see a fragile future for Temple Micah. And this year is a perfect example of how the unexpected can can make us all think about how to be strong in the future. So as Deborah just said, building on the strong foundation we've laid in annual pledges, the auction, annual giving, we're here this evening to talk about how you can plan for a gift to Temple Micah after your lifetime, and how that's the next step in making sure Temple Micah will be an even brighter beacon in decades to come. In a few minutes, Gail and Jim will offer some practical advice on ways to make a planned gift to Temple Micah. But I want to suggest a handful of takeaways beforehand. I guess if they're takeaways beforehand, maybe they're giveaways if you do it beforehand. So first, number one, planned giving is easy. The vast majority of planned gifts to any organization are bequests or designations from retirement accounts. They're really not that complicated. Two, you don't have to be a zillionaire to make a meaningful planned gift. Gifts of any size are welcome, they're great, and the cumulative effect of many planned gifts, large and small, is tremendous over time. Three, many people discover when they start exploring what they can do through planned giving that they can give more than they ever thought they could during their lifetimes. Now, you've probably heard this old expression from fundraisers that say you should give until it hurts. Planned giving is a way to give until it feels great. Finally, you can consider a planned gift at your own pace. There is no rush. You should take the time to consult a trusted professional to make the plan that's best for you, and you should make sure that your family loved ones, other beneficiaries know about and support your decision. Now, before we get to more of the specifics, we're going to play a brief video clip of Bert Greenstein's comments during our live seminar about a year ago, last November. He couldn't join us tonight, but many of you know Bert very well. He's a patriarch. He's a founding member of Temple Micah, and he served on the High Holidays Committee in 1968. I was born, but I was only in high school. And wonderfully, as he will tell you, Bert has named Temple Micah as a beneficiary of his estate. So now let's hear from Bert.
Specifically felt that I would want to make sure that Temple Micah was included in my will. And after my mother died in 1989, I knew that I had to revise my will. So I spoke to one of the members here, and I said, I know you don't do wills, but who does? And he directed me to Silverstein and Mullins. And I figured this sounds like a very high-powered organization. So I called this person that he mentioned. I expected his reaction to be, well, thank you for calling, but we don't deal with anything under $10 million. Actually, he was very accommodating, and we set up a date, and I brought in my old will, and he had a young assistant with him, and we went over things, and he would say, well, what about that? I said, no, not that person. No, this person has died. And so by the time we got through, the young assistant looked up at me and said, if I were you, I'd be very careful crossing K Street for the next 2 weeks, as you're practically intestate. But I did stay with this young individual who has been my trust attorney ever since. And about every 7 or 8 years, we have to revise things as Virginia law changes. But we did set it up, the will, as a living revocable trust. And specifically, the trust is divided into 3 parts, and Temple Micah is 1/3.
To Deborah. Thank you, Noel and Bert. That was great. Just a reminder to start typing in your questions for any or all of the panelists. I'm sure more questions will come to mind as the panelists speak. But I'd like to now turn to Sid Booth, a longstanding member of the Micah community and a former Micah president. Sid. Need to unmute.
Mute myself like any old Zoom idiot. Thank you, Deborah, for including me. And it's nice to see all those friendly faces out there. You've asked me why I favor taking steps now and to talk about assuring that the temple can serve the needs of our community for many years into the future. The reasons for Elka and me are simple and personal. For more than 50 years, she and I have found a warm home at Temple Micah that meets many of our family's religious, educational, and social needs. We learn here about our heritage. We are challenged at Micah by our tradition and by our very smart and compassionate rabbis. We are challenged to become better Jews and to be mindful and caring and to share the work to repair our broken world. Elka and I go a long way back with the temple. We met while stuffing envelopes for the welcoming of Rabbi Melman, our first full-time rabbi. We know firsthand that Micah is an all hands on deck experience. Everybody pitches in. We happen to be the first Micah couple who met here and married here. Our children, Melissa and David, went through our religious school, and they were b'nai mitzvah by Rabbi Zemmel. We have shared simchas here, made wonderful enduring friendships, and maybe learned a thing or two. When David died suddenly in 2009, Rabbi Zemmel and Letterman and the Michael community supported us in our grief. Our later years at Micah have been enriched by Aging Together, a program to engage largely older members and reduce isolation. We have participated in the monthly Lunch and Learn lectures, weekend retreats, and Wise Aging. Now, Wise Aging is a wonderful innovation that offers social, emotional, and spiritual insights to help individuals meet the challenges of our older years with a sustaining spirit. I tell you about our experience to illustrate, well, Elke and I feel a tremendous bond to our congregation. We are so grateful to have found this exceptional spiritual community and perhaps to have had a small role in building it. We are deeply grateful for what Micah has meant to us. So, what do we do about our gratitude? As you will hear from Jim Hamos this evening, we want to ensure that this journey of Micah endures for future generations. I was one of several members who explored an endowment mechanism for Micah some 15 years ago. I couldn't be happier that the temple now has established endowment-like funds to support future needs and is offering planned giving opportunities. This is why, when we updated our wills earlier this year, Elke and I made sure to provide for Temple Micah. Full disclosure. That updating was actually more than 5 years ago, and it was only this horrible pandemic that spurred us to stop procrastinating. So I'm glad to say that we have now committed to provide for Temple Micah in our estate plan, and we're working on the final details. Having Temple Micah in our estate plan gives me a sense of comfort that we are planting seeds for the future of the Jewish people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. We'll now turn to Gail Kahn, wills, estates, and probate lawyer practicing primarily in Maryland, to offer us something of a primer on approaches to planned giving. Gail, don't forget to unmute.
Hey everybody, I'm Gail Kahn. I'm a solo practitioner. I practice in Maryland. And just so we're really clear right up front, I don't use this as an opportunity to market myself. You all live far too far away from me to come to me for services. I'm just here to offer advice and to support your temple. And the other thing is I'm only barred in Maryland. So if you live in Virginia or DC, I'm not your lawyer on top of that. So I'm gonna share my screen with you and talk to you about why you should give to Temple Micah very briefly. I think that's been very well and beautifully covered, but mostly what to think about, how to do it, and sort of the nuts and bolts of how to make a gift to an organization that you support. So just want to confirm that you can all see the screen that I'm sharing. Yes? Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so gifting after death. Gifting after death is actually one of the nicest things to do for people, because it's money you no longer need because you're no longer here. And we used to belong to a temple, and every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the rabbi, who had a terrible voice, but he sang lustily and heartily, would sing a song about a good deed makes you feel good. And gifting to the things that you support and the people that you support is definitely a great way to make yourself feel good. And as is so ably said, it ensures a strong institution for those who follow, and no gift is too large. And more importantly, no gift is too small. I work with a lot of people who want to give as little as $100 and as much as a large percentage of their estate to the causes that they support. And the way I like to think of it is, you don't know what your gift can do for others. It's basically throwing a pebble in a pond, and the ripples that go far and go wide outside of your sight. So another reason that people like are charitably minded sometimes is to reduce the amount of estate taxes that might be owed by their family after they die. They are concerned that they want to make a charitable gift anyway, and they want to minimize how much they pay to the government in taxes. So in federal world, if you have an overall estate, and I'll explain what an estate is in a few minutes. If you have an overall estate of $11 million or less, there are no estate taxes at your death when you give that to your friends and family. And in Maryland and the District of Columbia, your total estate, if it's 5 million or less, there are no estate tax concerns. And in Virginia, there is just no estate tax at all. So what people will do sometimes, and I don't have too many clients like this because really $11 million is an incredible amount of money to have accumulated during a person's lifetime, is if they have in Maryland an estate that's $5 or $6 million and they want to make sure their kids don't have to pay estate taxes and they're charitably minded, they might give the first $1 million to the organization that they support, and then the rest of their estate goes to the people that they care about without having any estate taxes paid on that. Okay, so what is your estate? Your estate is everything that you own at death. So your home, the contents of your home, your sofas, your jewelry, your cars, it's your bank accounts. Accounts that you own jointly with someone else, such as if you put one of your kids on your account or a friend on your account for convenience. When we are completing the documentation to determine how much your estate is, the government takes the position that if someone else's name is on the account, that is for convenience only, and the entire account actually belongs to the person who died. Of course, there's arguments against that, but we're not going to get into any nitty-gritty details. Investment accounts. So if you have an investment account with Schwab or Fidelity, it's considered to be part of your estate. Even if it has a beneficiary on it, it's still part of your estate at the time of you die. And then, of course, retirement accounts. And living in the DMV, of course, retirement accounts are IRAs, TSP. We have a lot of people who work for the universities, so it's TIAA-CREF. 403Bs, Roth accounts. Another part of your estate is your life insurance. Even though you're giving it away at death, it's actually still something that's considered to be yours at the time of your death. Any annuities that you might have, and even any post-death benefits. A lot of people work for the federal government, and there's some dribs and drabs of money that get given to beneficiaries after a person dies that are considered to be part of your overall estate. And when you add that all up, if you are in Washington, D.C. or Maryland, and that number is over 5 million, then the amount over 5 million is subject to Maryland estate tax or District of Columbia estate tax. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing the screen for just a minute, and this will be an interesting exercise. I'm not really sure how to do that. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the video that you're seeing now, and I'm going to go to a different one. Can everybody see that one? The one that says 4 ways to give what you have to those you love?
Yes,
Noah, can you
do that.
thumbs up? Okay, thanks. All right, so if you have a pen and a piece of paper available, I'm going to keep this on the screen for a few minutes, and if you could write that chart down, and then I'm going to fill it in with you without you having to share any of your personal information with me. So the purpose of this is to show how your money flows at death, and to show different ways that you can give what you have to those you love, whether you meant to or not. And sometimes there are surprises. So everything that a person owns goes into one of these 4 categories. So a typical, there is no typical, but let's take a husband and wife or just a single person who owns a home. So if you own something jointly, the things you would put in that joint ownership box are the things you own jointly. And what I typically see with my clients are they own their home jointly. If it's a husband and a wife or a partnership, they would maybe have bank accounts that are jointly owned and investment accounts that are jointly owned. And sometimes the car is jointly owned. Timeshares are jointly owned, vacation properties, sometimes, anything else that you could put a kid's name on or a partner's name on. And the way it works with joint ownership is if at the time of your death, the person who becomes the owner of that without any legal process is the joint owner. Even though it's still part of your estate and it's considered in your estate for estate tax purposes, the ownership changes without having to go to court to change the ownership, though we certainly will always have paperwork to do. Okay, the next area of how to give what you have to those you love is transfer on death. And in transfer on death accounts, that would be typically what you would see for retirement accounts, for IRAs, your Roth, your annuities, if you have annuities, anything that you would put a beneficiary on it. And even if you're not going to meet with a lawyer, which no one's telling you that you have to do that right now, it is a really good idea from time to time to check your beneficiaries and make sure that they're updated, because people get married, people get divorced, people die, and I have on more than one occasion had the surprise of sending life insurance money to a person in a family who hasn't been in contact for 30 years in one case, or we had a $250,000 life insurance that went to an ex-wife and she turned it into a silver Mercedes. So definitely want to check your beneficiaries. And then the next way to give what you have to those you love is through a trust. A trust is a legal document that you should never do yourself. And a trust only transfers what you have to those you love if you actually change the title on your asset from yourself to your trust. So what does that mean? So let's say I, Gail Kahn, have a bank account at Sandy Spring Bank, and I write a trust for myself. What I would do with that trust then is I would actually go to Sandy Spring Bank with the actual trust document and tell the bank, hey, I have a trust, let's change the name on my account to that of my trust. And only after I have them physically change the name on the account to my trust does my trust control that account. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, they'll come to me with these really beautiful, thick, well-written trusts on glorious paper and a big binder with gold letters on it. And then when we start filling in the 4 ways to give what you have to those you love, there's nothing in the trust. Maybe because all of their money is in their TIAA CREF account and they jointly own a home with their partner. Or maybe it's because they just never bothered to go around and retitle everything. And that's a pretty expensive mistake to make for after they die. And then the next way to give what you have to those you love is through your will. The will is the catch-all. It catches anything that isn't given away through joint ownership, through transfer on death, or through your trust. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing this screen. Hey, it worked. And I'm going to go to the next screen. Okay, so we've talked about the 4 ways to give what you have to those you love. And next. Alrighty. So when thinking about gifting money to Temple Micah, there are lots of different ways that you can do it. And I'm going to go through the different ways to think about, and then each person who chooses to make a gift, how you do it is entirely based upon what you have, how much you want to give, and the way that works best for the things that you own. Okay, so like Noel said, changing a beneficiary account and making that beneficiary Temple Micah is the easiest way to make a gift to Temple Micah at death. And the sweetest money to give to Temple Micah is money that you have not yet paid income tax on. So if you have an IRA, if you have a TSP account, if you have a 401k account, if you have a TIAA-CREF account, I know I'm repetitive, but I find that really helps sort of make things make the most sense. Those are accounts. Now Roth accounts are in a different category. but we're talking about accounts where you have put money aside while you were working and have not yet paid income tax on that money. So what you need to know is when a person dies, the beneficiary, those accounts get recharacterized as inherited accounts for the benefit of that person who is the named beneficiary. And if that beneficiary is like your child or a friend or your spouse, when that beneficiary starts to take out their required minimum distribution, or they're also known as their minimum required distribution, an RMD or an MRD. There's a lot of rules about that. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to drone on. They have to pay ordinary income tax on every dollar that they take out of the account. However, if you give any money from those accounts to a charitable organization such as Temple Micah does not pay income tax when they withdraw that money. So it's a really simple example. You have $100,000 in your IRA, you leave 25% to one child, you have 75% you divide equally among your 3 children, and the other 25% you give to Temple Micah. The 3 children, they each get 25,000 of the 100, and they pay ordinary income tax on that $25,000 at their ordinary income tax rate. So they might end up with $20,000 instead of $25,000 after the tax. But Temple Micah, they get that piece of that IRA that you've left them, and they do not pay any tax on that gift. And so they get a pure stream of $25,000. Now, with an account with a beneficiary, you do not have to have just one beneficiary named on it. You can have 2, 3, 5, however much time and space you have in your brain to do paperwork. Though I do recommend for people to keep it simple, because when things are kept simple, there's less likelihood for mistakes after you're gone. And once you're gone, it is very difficult to interpret what you wanted or to correct mistakes. Now I want to address Roth accounts. Roth accounts also have beneficiaries. However, that is money that you put away after you paid income tax on it. So the money that comes out to the beneficiaries, no income tax is owed. Of course, Temple Micah would love to be named as the beneficiary of your Roth, but if you're choosing which account to give to your children and which account, or your friends or other people in your life, and which account to give to Temple Micah, the Roth account is not the best, most tax advantageous account to give to Temple Micah, because remember, Temple Micah doesn't pay tax. So you want to give something like the IRA or the 401k or the TSP to Temple Micah. All right, life insurance, you can always leave a life insurance account to Temple Micah. All you have to do is update the beneficiary. And annuities can always have Temple Micah listed as one of or the only beneficiary. Another way to give to Temple Micah is through your will or your trust. So a will, as you probably know, is a written document. It has to be signed in a particular way. Each state has their own rules about how they are to be signed and witnessed, and it is not really something that you should write on your own. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and in those 15 years, I have seen many, many wills that people have written themselves, and very, very few of them are valid. They often are just really beautiful love notes to their family, and they would not hold up in probate court. So if you're gonna want to make sure that what you have, you want to give to the people and the entities that you care about, I strongly suggest that you go to an attorney that you trust to write that for you. So a will is a piece of paper with writing on it. It goes into effect after you die. It can be changed anytime while you're alive. And remember, it's the catch-all. It catches anything that's not jointly owned. It catches anything that doesn't have a beneficiary, and it catches anything that isn't in your trust. Now, let me just check the next slide. I can't remember what I put there. Nope. Okay. A trust is also a writing. Again, a trust is not a document you write yourself. I've never actually had a person come to me with a do-it-yourself trust, which is probably just as well, because again, they're hard to get right unless you know what you're doing. And if you're gone, there's nobody who can fix it as easily as you can while you're alive. So different ways to give to Temple Micah in your will. There are two big portions of your will where you can make a gift. One is through a specific bequest, and one is through a residuary bequest. So I'm going to break it down and take you through both. So a specific bequest, the first thing you should know is when we have a pile of money after someone has died and we have done the probate process, which is we've found the assets and we've liquidated what needs to be appropriately liquidated, and we've paid whatever taxes need to be paid. What we have left is a pile of money. And the first things that get done is the specific bequests get made. So if a client hasn't really thought carefully, they can end up having all of their specific bequests honored and then nothing left for the quote residuary estate. So what we'll often see with a specific bequest is people address who's going to get their pets and how much money they're going to give for the care of their pets. We'll see gifts. I have a lot of people who want to give something to their next door neighbor to thank them for mowing their lawn and looking after the snow removal on their driveway. We have a lot of people who want to give something to, the summer camp or to their temple, to the JCC, or even, cousins and friends before they give money to their kids. A specific bequest can be any amount. And as you see in my PowerPoint, I wrote it could be $100, $1,000, even $1 million. I was speaking with some clients today, and the mom wanted to make sure that she gave gifts to her grandchildren, but she was very, very concerned that when she died, there would be nothing left for her kids. So the way we approach that is through an if-then clause. So for example, and this is actually very similar to what we had to this particular client's financial situation today, is if I have $200,000 or more, so remember, we've liquidated everything, we've paid the expenses, and now we have this pot of money. If there's $200,000 in this pot, I give X amount to Temple Micah. And of course, since I want to support Temple Micah, I came up with a nice big number for you to strive for. I give $50,000 to Temple Micah. But if I have less than $200,000 in my estate, I give $25,000 to Temple Micah. And that will make sure that you don't accidentally not give to the other entities or people that you want to give to. And that's one way to do a specific bequest. And as we said before, I'm going to redo this PowerPoint so it prints nicely, and give it out to it'll be distributed so you don't have to worry about writing this down. The other way you can do things in your will or in your trust is by doing a percentage of your estate. Okay, again, we have the big pot of money, we've made some specific bequests, and now we have a smaller pot of money left. And in that smaller pot of money is where you would give a percentage. And for example, and I do see this quite a bit, people will say I give 15% of my estate or 20% of my estate to, for example, Temple Micah, and then the remainder I divide equally among my children. And that way you have set the seeds and helped support the organization that you love and believe in, as well as made sure that you have supported your children and left them something to remember you by. All right, now, so one thing to think about is, do you use beneficiaries, or do you use a will or a trust? It's a very individual choice. There is no wrong answer. There is no right answer. We have to look at everybody's personal setup. And one of the advantages of using a will or a trust is that you have more control over where that money goes more easily. Now, I know you can have control with beneficiary language with a IRA or a TIA-CREF account. However, it's a little bit more awkward for the financial companies to figure that out. And I've learned over the years, we want to make things simple for your financial company that's distributing money to beneficiaries. We have to assume that the offices that are taking care of these distributions are underfunded, understaffed, and undereducated. So let's keep it simple. So if, for example, there was a particular thing you wanted to support at Temple Micah, and this will be talked about when I'm done, I believe. Putting the specific bequest in your will or in your trust, or putting the residuary bequest in your will or your trust, you can basically funnel that money exactly where you want it to go. And then I cannot state this enough, but for a will or a trust, please, it is not a do-it-yourself project. Okay, finally, last time I spoke to your lovely organization, one of the questions that came up from the panel of attendees was, how do you choose a financial planner? And so I was specifically asked to talk about that as well. And one of the nice things about me talking about that is I am not a financial planner. And so I think of my advice as very, very neutral, in that I make no money from talking to you about these things, and I'm not drumming up business. So a financial planner is, of course, someone who you work with, who helps you figure out how to best use your money to support yourself and to meet your financial goals, whether they are comfortable retirement, making sure you leave money for your children, or making sure that you leave some legacy for this organizations that you support. There's a number of different ways that financial planners can be paid. Some of them are fee-based by the hour. Some of them are a percentage of money under management. And I'm sure there are other ways as well. Oh yeah, and there's also those who make money based upon the products that they sell you. There are good arguments for a wide range of which way you choose. The most important thing is that you choose somebody who is trustworthy, which can be sometimes hard to figure out. And then there's also the concern of if they're a fiduciary or not. Now, a fiduciary is somebody who owes you a greater duty of care under the law, meaning that they don't act reasonably towards you. They have to act more than reasonably towards you. They have to really put your interests ahead of their own. And if you are working with a financial planner or financial advisor, or however they call them, if that person is a fiduciary, then it is so much less likely that they are going to sell you a product that you don't need. Because the financial advisor, you can have a great financial advisor who does make commissions on the different products that they sell, or you can have a great financial advisor who charges a percentage of the money under management, or you can have terrible in all of those categories. But those are just things to be aware of. And then one of the things that I'm really keen on is make sure you find out how your financial advisor, if they are placing trades for bonds or stocks on your behalf, where do they place their trades? Do they use Schwab, Fidelity, HBAC, or one of the other major financial clearinghouses, or are they using their own internal house to make those trades? And if they're using their own internal house, do not use them. That was the Bernie Madoff situation, and it still happens with other companies today. And then, of course, how do you find somebody? The best way to find somebody is to ask a lot of people. And, I have a lot of clients who ask me, and I have a huge list of people that I really like. And we try to match the right personality for the right person, because there's a lot of really great people in this area. Ask your accountant, ask your attorney, find out where your neighbors use. Do they like the person? Is that person responsive? Are they kind? Are they ethical? And then, of course, there's no harm in interviewing a number of people until you find that you're with somebody who is the right fit for you, temperament-wise, risk-wise, as well as has the bandwidth to pay attention. So, all right, that's it for me. I hope that was useful.
Gail, thank you. That was
I'll stop sharing. You did it. Okay, great.
That was very helpful. Thank you. Before I introduce Jim Hamos again, I just want to remind folks to put their questions in the chat window. We understand the chat function was not working earlier, but it is up and running now. So please get your questions in. So batting cleanup, Jim Hamos, as I mentioned, is a member of Micah's board and member of the development committee, among his many other roles at Micah. And he's going to just round out Gail's overview by saying a few words about the specific options available at Temple Micah.
Right. Thank you very much, Deborah. So my job is to sort of give you a sense of, once you decide to make a plan giving to Micah, what do we do with it? So let me cover a few points. Number one, you've heard a lot about the dollars parts coming to Micah. And I want to first emphasize that we do not want you, through your will or trust, to make a gift of something that's a tangible item. So don't give to us either an art piece, a house, some piece of furniture. Those are great things, but make sure that those are disposed of as part of your estate before giving that tangible item to the synagogue. Secondly, please don't make a restriction. So for example, you want to make a gift, you have X amount of dollars, and say, this gift is to buy 10 more chairs in the sanctuary because you haven't been able to find chairs, or whatever other specific needs. So we really do not want you to restrict your gifts. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of 4 large buckets that we're asking you to think about, and then a few final additional points. So the first is, if you simply through your will say, I'm giving, as Gail has mentioned, a percentage or a specific dollar amount to Temple Micah, that's considered an unrestricted gift. And that gift comes to, when your estate goes through all the different things that dispose of the dollars, that money will come to Micah, and it's really left up to the Micah team, which is the administration, the clergy, and the board, to think about what to do with that sort of gift. And I'll, in a few minutes, I'll tell you about what is the most recent practice that has been around those kinds of things. So if you just say this money goes to Temple Micah, it's considered unrestricted. But then I'd like to also mention 3 other pots of dollars. One is, many people want to give to an endowment. And Temple Micah has an endowment. Over our many years, it hasn't grown that much over the years. It's something that Sid and I, when we started kind of this conversation, we're thinking about having a very large endowment. The only issue with an endowment is that when you make a gift to an endowment, the principal that you give, what's called the corpus of the endowment, has to stay forever in the endowment. So that the only parts that become available to Micah over time then are the growth and income that comes off of that endowment. So that leaves, in the long term, until you have a very large endowment, like many institutions over many years have, that pots of dollars have minimal access for use by the board. An additional quasi endowment that we created more recently is what we call a legacy fund. So we have an endowment fund, but we also have a legacy fund, and it is a quasi endowment. And what meant by that is our sheer intention is for that to grow over time and yield monies that can be used for whatever needs by either the operating fund or by the board for some need of the board. But what's special about the legacy fund, if there truly is an exigent situation, and I'm trying to say it has to be an emergency financial situation, like a fire in the building, the roof falls in or something, where all of a sudden there are major needs of the community, a legacy fund can be tapped at that time, while an endowment cannot. And the rules that we've established in our policy is that the 75% of the board has to agree to that there is such a financial need, and it has to be counted to the full temple membership at the same time. So we're not going to make up some special need that we think this is important. It's not the building next door, for example, of a few years ago. It truly is some emergency financial situation that a legacy fund can be tapped into. And then the fourth kind of fund that we actually consider is our innovation fund. And this is something that was established a few years ago. It has spawned several major activities like the Haftorah project, like the other activities out there. So 4 things to consider when you're making something in your will or your trust. One is an unrestricted gift. We're just saying it's Temple Micah, our endowment fund, if that is what you desire somehow, our legacy fund, our innovation fund. I could tell you our most recent practice around these things has been the board's practices when we receive an unrestricted fund, has been actually to put the money half and half in the legacy fund and the innovation fund. There hasn't been real needs to use resources from an unrestricted gift in recent years. We've had very balanced budgets. So we've simply, any recent gifts over the last few years have simply half has typically gone to the legacy fund and half to the innovation fund. Now you may wonder where you might let us know about these things. We do have a statement of intention form. This sort of answers the question that Martha asked a little bit ago. You do not have to fill out this form. It's something that Rachel will tell you how you can get the form. It's something that it's not legally binding, but it is a place where you can indicate how you're anticipating your will has mentioned these things. By and large, it's your will that dictates it in the end, or your trust that dictates how funds will come to Temple Micah. I do want to assure you that all of any decision through a statement of intention form or ultimately a bequest that goes to Temple Micah is done with full anonymity and privacy. We are a community that has not named buildings or chairs or anything for specific things. They're very, very privately held things. We honor you, but that in terms of individuals, and let you know this, but it's not publicly stated. And then finally, my last point is the board over the last few years has created very, very specific policies. So we have a gift policy that specifically lays out what is in the endowment fund, what is in the legacy fund, what's in the innovation fund. And in addition, there is, as monies are beginning to accumulate, an investment policy that's very, very conservative. So with that, I'll leave you to other sorts of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That's great. So we will now move into the Q&A portion of our discussion. Rachel Gross is going to pitch the questions that have come in thus far to our panelists.
Right. Thank you. I do have a few questions to start with, but please, if you think of other things, put them in the chat. The first question was a clarification for you, Gail, of the if-then clause in a specific bequest. The example you gave had, if I have more than a certain amount, then like 50,000 to Micah. Can you also do if-then with a percent?
Oh, actually, I've done that. If I have, X amount in the pot, I divide my pot this way. And if I have X amount in the pot, then I divide, less than X amount, then I divide my residuary estate this way. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. The next question. So Jim already answered the question of property and artwork and furniture. Part of that is because it puts a burden on the synagogue to sell those things. And the synagogue, generally, we don't have the expertise and the connections. So part of that is that it actually adds a burden for the synagogue in a certain way. Martha, did you feel that that your question was answered about what we prefer to receive of all of these options? I guess you can thumbs up, thumbs down. Jim, could you say a word about?
I truly would say there's not a preference.
Yep.
That truly, we leave this to you. I mean, certainly an unrestricted gift lets the people that are running everything, the clergy, the administration, the board, at a time of an unrestricted gift say, what are our needs? I mean, is there a specific need? An unexpected need of the moment that we're thinking about, for example, is we all want to get back into the synagogue. Will be COVID friendly. I mean, will be fully taken care of. So we're thinking, that's kind of a need of the moment, but might not be 10 years down the line. So an unrestricted gifts allows the board to think it through and make sure that everyone can really articulate what it is. That being said, some people like to restrict it a little bit more. Some people feel very, again, they want to lock it away in endowment and be there for the long haul. Others very value the innovation fund, which has been nicely funded over the recent years, allowed us to do very innovative things. So there is no specific preference. It's a personal decision.
Thank you. The next question if you have already given to the endowment fund, can you switch those funds to other funds like legacy or innovation?
Well, so it's quite, number one, if you've given it because you named it, let's say prior to death. So if you've given $100 to the endowment fund last year, once you name the endowment fund, we cannot move it out of the endowment fund. So that's once, and that's in some ways we're having an endowment fund is sort of a belief of many people over time, and why we still will maintain it over time. In the future, so as part of your planned giving, if you wrote it on a letter, a statement of intention only to us, that by itself is not binding. So it's really what you've written into your will or your trust. So if you do not want it to be part of endowment, it's very important for you to go back to a lawyer to make sure that language has changed, that you'd rather go to whatever the other funds that we've mentioned.
Thank you. Gail, I think the next question is for you. And this is about working with a financial planner and them having their, whether or not they have your best interests at mind. This is actually a question from me. I was working with a financial planner and I said I would like the money to be used as, I wanted it to be unrestricted. And they said, no, you want it to go into an endowment. And I said, I really don't. And I know that he was thinking that that was in my best interest to do endowment. Have do you have any, in terms of dealing with financial planners, because we have stated that unrestricted would be the best thing for us because the board can put it where it is most needed. But I do know that there is a bias towards endowment in planned giving.
I'm not really sure what your question is.
In terms of, I guess in terms of the bias towards endowment comes from the financial planner saying, if you give money and it's not in the endowment, they can spend it, they can do whatever they want for it, and that's not a good legacy. Or maybe Noel, you could speak to that.
It sounds to me as if your financial planner is speaking out of turn, in the sense that your financial planner's job is to manage your resources to your best advantage over time. What you decide to do with your money through charitable giving is entirely up to you. And if you choose to designate your planned gift of whatever kind it is to endowment, that's your decision. That's not a decision for a financial planner to advise you on. That might be something that you would ask others at the temple to advise you about, or whatever, or your alma mater, whatever other organization you're thinking about. But I would say that your preference is your preference, and it's up to the organization to honor your intent as a donor.
Yeah, I'm just add in too that, we all bring our biases with us, and sometimes we say stupid things and sometimes we're just stupid. So, Rachel, you might have a woman or a man, I guess it was a man, who just said stupid things, or you might have a person who just has biases and they're not yours. I did want to address something else that was alluded to about changing your will or your trust. Don't write on your original trust or your original will, because that can invalidate it. Even if you write on page 22, there was a recent District of DC case that came out that something that was written on page 22 or page 59 essentially invalidated the entire document, even though that was, to a person with common sense, not what was intended. So I have a lot of clients, they love to color on their documents. Do not do that. Okay, it is not a place for creative writing or expression. So.
Thank you. I'm looking to see, are there any other questions? Or somebody whose question was in here? Let me just see, another one popped up. Does the temple encourage or discourage bequests to, say, support music programs or interns or other specific programs? Jim, I think you would, if you could respond to that.
So, I made the most extreme case earlier about don't ask us to buy 10 chairs for the sanctuary. So that was trying to be extreme, but we'd rather you not name specific programs, just because we have very variety of sources for different funds, and we know there are interests. As with other things, it's also then more difficult bookkeeping and financing to take care of. So we'd rather, we understand people's wishes, but we'd rather you not name to specific, be it our music needs or whatever.
I speak to that as well.
Yeah.
So one other thought you can do is, if you want your money to go to a specific use, your attorney can write what's called, I believe it's called precatory language, where you say, I make a gift, a general gift to Temple Micah. It is my hope and wish and aspiration that when using this money that they direct it towards these things, but I understand that this wish is not binding. And that way the temple knows that given a choice of the things to do with the money, they can do it that way, but there's no binding language that requires it. It's not ideal. Truly, the temple would rather not have any binding language or this precatory language either. And then there was one other thought. Oh, we had a situation where the will that was written by a client, a different attorney, they wanted to give money to an organization for glaucoma use for the people who use that organization. After the client died, the organization contacted me and said, we don't have any glaucoma patients here. And so we went to court and we got the gift changed. So that if you set something up that can't be done, then the result is, if possible, we get it redirected to honor your intent by going to court. But really, it's best not to have to do that, because we want, anytime that you're gone, there is no sweeter promise to keep than honoring someone's wishes who no longer knows that their wishes are being honored. And so we try to, you want to try and put it in such a way that your wishes can be honored and nobody has to second guess them or go to court to honor them.
I think Betsy may have had a question.
Yes, Betsy had a question about the if-then. Why do an if-then rather than a percentage?
It's just a very individual situation. If there are people, many people who at the end of their life, they've had a beautiful life, they've used their money nicely, and they just want to make sure that there's enough money to go to all the things that they care about. And so they know if they give too much money to, squirting the toothpaste, if the toothpaste squirts out in one direction, there's not going to be enough to squirt it out in the other. And that would be why you'd use an if-then. But if either you're not concerned about that, or you have plenty of money to go around, however much you define as plenty of money to go around, then you wouldn't use it. It really and truly doesn't come up too much with my clients who are giving, bequests here and there to their family or to the charitable things that they support.
Thank you. Returning to another question about whether we want members to tell us if they have included Micah in their estate, and how much detail. Somebody, I'm not sure who should take that one. Jim?
Yeah, no, I think it's useful for the office to know that to pay attention when things come across in different papers. So it's we have a file of some of these statement of intention forms. there have been times that it's very orderly, that someone passes, we have a form, we're aware of it, and there's very easy communication with the legal part of this then in the family. There have been other times when, oh, look at this. Rachel wakes up one day and guess what? Something, a gift has been made. So there's not an absolute to this. It's as much as us being attuned to it and trying to make it easier at the end. And again, we know that there are many personal kinds of thoughts on these things.
Other questions? That's all I have in the chat. Nancy, I'm sorry, Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. If we have no further questions, then we'll conclude the program. I just want to give everyone another minute or so to just think about whether there's something else they'd like to ask our panelists. And of course, if you do have further questions that come to mind after we sign off here, please drop Rachel a note and she'll make sure it gets to one of us or one of our panelists to get back to you. Rachel, do you want to just say how you will make accessible the slides?
Yeah, so I will email everybody who participated. I think I know everybody who's on here, know how to find you. I will email everybody the presentation from Gail. We'll make it sort of dark on light so that it's more printable. The other two documents, Gail, you had the worksheet, and then also we didn't show, but the sample language for giving that you might want to use. And we also have a brochure about planned giving and a statement of intent form. And I think if there's anything else, I can include that and send that in a packet to everybody.
Okay, that would be great. And just reinforcing one of the items you mentioned, Gail had prepared a form that gives at least a sample language of how to make to correctly identify Micah in your bequest. So look for that in that material as well. So this concludes our program for this evening. I want to thank Noel, Bert, Sid, Gail, and Jim for your participation and your insights. I also want to especially thank Sue Alpern-Fish, who's Micah's development consultant, who helped put this program together for us. And of course, Rachel, for all that you do and your support for the development committee, ensuring that the technology and the programming ran smoothly for this evening. So I hope everyone does have a good evening, and thank you for joining us.